Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Axgunner, the real Axgunner, and today we have a very special video. I'm going to be showing you how to gear your characters properly. I've just seen too many players gear their characters inefficiently, or they're just simply clueless. They don't even know what they're doing. But fear not, because Axgunner is here and I'm going to explain everything in depth. Now, a little heads up before we get into the video, I'll be using the word funding instead of gearing, just because it's a little bit more comfortable for me to say. Now, when it comes to funding your characters, there's ultimately two ways to do it. We got balanced funding, and then we got skewed funding. So what's going to happen is we're going to talk about these two funding methods in depth, and then talk about which funding method is better. So first, let's talk about balanced funding. So what is balanced funding? Balanced funding is when you upgrade all your gear at the same time. Now, how a typical balanced funding path would look is sort of like this character here. First, you get all your slots filled, right? Then you get your gear to 10 stars and like 2 lines epic. And then you would slowly start getting geared to unique 1 line, and then unique 2 line, and then getting everything to legendary 1 line, and then legendary 2 lines, so on and so on and so on. So it's a very steady method of progressing to about the mid game. Now I want to show you guys a graph. Let me pull this up real quick. Here it is. This is the balance funding graph, and this graph is going to be very important in understanding these two methods of funding. So let's quickly go through this now. So first, you got these 2 lines. You got a linear line, the red line, which is going to represent character strength. So with balanced funding, your character strength will steadily increase as you're gearing your character. Now, this blue line here represents funding required. So as you can see, as your character is getting stronger, the funding required starts increasing exponentially. And then let's put some of these points on this graph as well. So we've got early game, which is to the left here, mid game, around or just before when these 2 lines cross, and then end game would be further to the right. So what does this graph mean? So what this graph means is from early to mid game, the funding required is very minimal. You're getting a lot of value for your balanced funding method, right? So early game up here, I would say this is when you have all your slots filled. We'll move a little bit to the right here. This is when you have everything like 10 stars and 2 lines epic. Move a little bit over to maybe the halfway point of early to mid game. This is when you have all your gear at like maybe 12 stars and 2 lines unique. And then now closer to this cross section, where I would officially call it mid game, would be you'd have all your gear at legendary 2 lines with 12 stars. And so after this point is when things get extremely difficult. So why does this funding required line begin to skyrocket? Well, let's have a think about it, right? So if your gear is 17 star, legendary 2 lines, what happens after? What's the next step? The next step would be getting your gear to 3 line legendary, right, on the main part, or you start going beyond 17 stars. Now, for people that don't have experience, it's an uphill battle. It really is. I've seen people spend 100 billion mesos trying to go from 17 star to 22 star and not even be able to do it. In fact, they come out with an equipment that's only, say, 15 star. So they didn't even get stronger. They got weaker, right? So if you are making your gear and you are going this balanced funding route, after the mid game, it gets very, very difficult, especially for the amount of character strength you're getting as well. It's just not really worth it. So to summarize, balanced funding, early to mid game, it's great, but from mid game, or if you're making your way towards end game, it's terrible. What would I categorize mid-game? Mid-game would be about 30k stat. Yeah, 30 to 35k stat, and I think anything above that is when you start hitting end-game territory here. So, you know, when you're looking to solo hard lucid, that sort of stuff, yeah? So now that we've talked about balance funding, we need to talk about skewed funding. But before we do that, let me just switch characters, because my main character, or my main account here in Aurora, is in that period of skewed funding. And you sort of see what I mean here. So first, what is skewed funding? Skewed funding is when you save up a whole bunch of mesos and you use that bunch of mesos to just upgrade or buy one piece of equipment, right? I'm talking about saving like 10, 20, 30 billion mesos, and then you spend that on one piece of equipment. I'm not talking about one piece of the anime, I'm talking about, you know, one piece of the equipment. And then after you spend that, you save another 10, 20, 30 bill, whatever the amount is, and then you buy another, save, buy another, save, buy another. So you gradually fill your slots up with, you know, very, very juicy items. Sort of like what I did on my Zero here. So my Zero here, 33k stat or 34k stat. I would consider this mid-game transitioning to late game, right? I'm able to solo a lot of the normal bosses. I'm sure I'm able to solo normal Lucid as well. So let's take a look at some of my gear, some of these crazy pieces of gear. Because like I said, how skewed funding is, you would save mesos and then spend it all on one piece. So, you know, look at this, 22 star Superior Goldlux earring, 6 lines of potential, sexy, juicy, hot, steamy. Absolab Night Shoulder, 17 star, this is not too crazy. And then 5 lines, so 40% strength. You know, my cape, for instance, 22 star, 5 lines, potential as well, nice flame, gloves, the same, etc. But not all my pieces of gear are like this, right? For example, if you look at my top, I swear on my mother's life, I have not upgraded this top in 1.5 years of playing. Just because this was my farming character, I didn't really have a reason to upgrade it. But this is what typically a skewed funding gear setup would look like. Well, you know, obviously this would be like 10 stars and maybe epic 2 lines, you know, just for that little bit of value. But same with my eye accessory as well. Yeah, it's just a boss accessory, 8 stars, potential's not even that good. You know, I'm not even using like a second pendant as well. So this is what skewed funding is, right? You save up a bunch of mesos and you buy one piece of godly equipment, and then you do that. So now let's take a look at the graph. You know, why do people go the skewed funding route? Okay, let me see if we can bring this up real quick. Here it is. So now this is the skewed funding graph. Now the difference between this and the balanced funding is, we'll go through it, right? So the funding required is the linear line. It's the red line here, right? It doesn't increase exponentially like the balanced funding. It's a very steady. And then the exponential line, right? Your power getting, you know, is every time you buy new equip, your power is like increasing by a lot, right? It's getting steeper. The increase is exponential. So these green numbers here on the bottom, you know, I do like to apologize. I'm not really good at, you know, stuff. What do you call it? Graphic design. So these numbers here would represent how, or each piece of gear that you've bought, right? So one piece of godly gear, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So from early to mid game, even though you have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces of godly gear, your character's not actually that strong. Why is that? Well, to sort of explain it, is to explain just character strength in general. So character strength is the average of all your gear together, right? So I'll use an analogy like soccer, right? If you got a soccer team, you got 11 players on your team. Imagine 10 of those players were toddlers. They just learned how to walk, right? They're short, they're tiny, they don't even know how to play. And then you're one player, right? That 11th player is Messi, right? Professional, this guy gets paid like $100 million a year. Does that make a good team? It doesn't, right? Just because you have one, really good piece of gear, or if you have one really good soccer player, your overall team or your overall character strength isn't gonna be that strong. But as you get more and more gear, they sort of start working with each other. Yeah, they start working with each other, and your character strength starts. You're taking these big leaps in power, man. So this is sort of the romantic side of skewed funding. Early to mid game, it kind of sucks, but from mid game to end game, it's crazy good. Okay, so does that all sort of make sense? I hope it makes sense, right? With skewed funding. So to summarize, skewed funding early to mid game, it's not that good, but from mid game to end game, it should be the only way you're progressing, right? It's the fastest and best way to progress to end game, period. So now that we've talked about these two funding methods, right? We've got balanced funding, and then we got skewed funding. So let's bring up both these graphs here. Where's the balanced one? Is that the right one? Yep, okay, that's the right one. Okay. Some people told me it was a little confusing before, but we're going to go with this. So which style is best? Is balanced funding better, or is skewed funding better, right? Which one should you do? Which style is best? Now, let's talk about Reboot first. So for the people who are playing Reboot that watch this, sadly, you can't really do skewed funding just because, I mean you can, but, you can't trade in Reboot. So, with Reboot, you've just got to go balanced funding all the way. That's just how it is, man. I'll make another video explaining it. Skewed funding. Oh man, I forgot to plug another video while doing this. All right, I forgot to say, but there is a specific way or strategies to do skewed funding. So I'm gonna make a separate video on how to buy equipment, right? How to skewed fund your character. Which, it's just too long to add into this video, right? You just this video will just be the basics of this, okay? So check that out. I'll leave it in the description box below. Skewed funding, or how to skewed fund your character will be, yeah. All right, so for regular server people, what do? Well, the best way to do it is you go balanced funding to about mid-game. So that's about, 17-star legendary 2 lines on everything. And then you switch to skewed funding. That is the fastest way to progress in this game. Period. Yeah. Is there anything? Yeah. So when would I know, or when should you know? I think a good indicator would be around 30k stat. So once you're around 30k stat, that's including arcane river symbols as well. That's when you need to start just saving up and buying equipment, yeah, or change from balanced funding to skewed funding. Yeah. Oh, what did I do there? Okay, there we go. Yeah. Is there anything else we need to talk about these two graphs now that we have them side to side? I would say not really. Yeah, this is pretty much the basics of it. If you guys have any more questions about this, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll try my best to answer it. But again, I will make a separate video on how to skewed fund in a little bit more details, strategies on doing it and whatnot. All right. So yeah, that's the two funding methods. Yeah, balanced funding and skewed funding. If this video has helped you in any way, shape, or form, hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more Maplestory content. And come visit me on Twitch as well if you have any questions or you just want to come hang out. I'm Axgunner, the real Axgunner. Peace out.